In the quiet, picturesque town of Pine Hill, the gruesome murder of Emily Carter sent shockwaves through the community. What appeared to be a peaceful, close-knit suburban enclave was shattered by a crime of passion and betrayal that revealed the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives. The lives of two couples, Sam and Rachel Foster, and Paul and Emily Carter, intertwined in ways that would lead to obsession, deceit, and ultimately, murder. Sam Foster was a respected architect, known for his charming demeanor and seemingly perfect marriage to Rachel, a dedicated schoolteacher. Paul Carter, a successful financial advisor, and his wife, Emily, were the Fosters' closest friends. The two couples shared more than just neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways. They also engaged in a consensual wife-swapping arrangement that initially brought excitement and novelty to their lives. However, beneath the surface of this unconventional lifestyle, dangerous emotions were brewing. Sam's fascination with Emily grew into an all-consuming obsession, one that Rachel, his wife, was painfully aware of. Emily, sensing the intensity of Sam's feelings, decided to put an end to the arrangement, not realizing the deadly consequences her decision would provoke. Sam and Rachel Foster had been married for 10 years, and from the outside, their marriage appeared to be a model of stability and happiness. Sam was a successful architect, known for his innovative designs and charismatic personality. Rachel, a third-grade teacher, was beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street, surrounded by a well-tended garden that Rachel took great pride in. Paul and Emily Carter moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Fosters. Paul, financial advisor, was outgoing and affable, always the life of the party. Emily, with her striking beauty and magnetic personality, was equally popular. The Carters brought a new dynamic to the neighborhood, and their friendship with the Fosters blossomed over shared interests and mutual respect. The idea of wife-swapping was first brought up during a dinner party at the Fosters' home. Fueled by wine and a sense of adventure, the conversation turned to the topic of open relationships. To everyone's surprise, the concept was met with curiosity rather than shock. Over the next few weeks, the idea was discussed more seriously, with all parties agreeing to boundaries and rules to ensure their primary relationships remained intact. The first encounter was awkward but exciting. Sam and Emily, and Paul and Rachel, exchanged partners for the night. It was a thrilling yet nerve-wracking experience, but one that left them eager for more. What started as a once-in-a-while experiment soon became a regular part of their lives, adding a spark to both marriages. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well. Both couples appeared happier and more connected. They maintained their social activities, often hosting joint parties and going on vacations together. Their secret was carefully guarded, discussed only within the confines of their homes or during private gatherings. The novelty of the arrangement brought a sense of exhilaration, and for a while, it seemed like they had found the perfect balance. However, as the months passed, subtle changes began to surface, particularly in Sam's behavior. He started to show an unusual amount of interest in Emily, often finding reasons to spend time alone with her. Rachel noticed his increasing preoccupation but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. Paul, too, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. Unbeknownst to the others, Sam's fascination with Emily was turning into something deeper and more troubling. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying their encounters in his mind and craving more time with her. What had started as a harmless adventure was slowly morphing into an obsession that would have devastating consequences for all involved. Sam's fascination with Emily was no longer just a thrill, it had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. He thought about her incessantly, his mind wandering to their encounters during work meetings and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his passion, now seemed secondary to his desire for Emily. He started to find ways to be near her, volunteering to help with tasks Paul usually handled or inviting the Carters over more frequently. Rachel began to notice the change in her husband. At first, she attributed it to the excitement of their new lifestyle, but soon it became clear that Sam's interest in Emily went beyond their agreement. He became irritable and distant when they weren't with the Carters, and his conversations often veered towards Emily's likes and dislikes, her quirks and habits. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Rachel confronted Sam. His reaction was defensive, dismissing her concerns as jealousy. Rachel, not wanting to disrupt the delicate balance they had established, let it go but kept a closer eye on him. Her suspicions grew when she found him staring at Emily during gatherings, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. Emily, too, began to sense Sam's growing obsession. Initially flattered by his attention, she soon found it uncomfortable. His touches became more possessive, his words more intimate than appropriate. She discussed her discomfort with Paul, who brushed it off, believing Sam was just more expressive in his affections. Paul's nonchalance left Emily feeling isolated in her concerns. The turning point came during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin the couples had planned. The getaway was meant to reconnect and enjoy some time away from their routine. However, the trip only served to highlight Sam's fixation. He monopolized Emily's time, insisting on taking her out on the lake alone, leaving Paul and Rachel behind. The tension was palpable, and Emily's attempts to distance herself were met with subtle resistance from Sam. One night, while sitting by the fire, Sam made a comment that crossed the line. He spoke about leaving everything behind and starting fresh, just the two of them. Emily, shocked and unsettled, excused herself and went to bed early. Rachel, who had overheard the conversation, confronted Sam again. This time, he was less dismissive but still refused to acknowledge the depth of his feelings. Rachel's frustration grew as she realized the extent of Sam's obsession. She loved her husband but was increasingly aware that his infatuation with Emily could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Carters. Despite her efforts to intervene, Sam's behavior only became more erratic. He started to follow Emily outside of their arranged meetings, showing up at her yoga classes and even appearing at her workplace under the guise of casual visits. Emily's unease turned to fear. She confided in a close friend who advised her to distance herself from Sam as much as possible. Determined to take control, Emily decided to end the arrangement altogether. She hoped that by doing so, Sam would return to his senses and they could all move on from this chapter without causing further harm. One evening, while Paul was away on a business trip, Sam showed up at the Carters' house unannounced. Emily was taken aback but let him in, hoping to avoid a scene. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Sam confessed his feelings for her, speaking of a future where they could be together openly. Emily, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was never meant to be more than a temporary excitement. As Sam's declarations became more intense, Emily's fear turned to anger. She realized she needed to put an end to this before it destroyed her marriage and her friendship with Rachel. She told Sam firmly that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries and her marriage. Sam, visibly shaken, tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Emily stood her ground. Over the next few days, Emily avoided Sam, hoping he would come to his senses. She confided in Rachel, who listened with a heavy heart. Rachel knew her husband's obsession had gone too far, and while she wanted to support Emily, she also felt a twisted loyalty to Sam. She promised Emily she would talk to him, hoping to diffuse the situation. However, Sam's obsession only deepened. He started showing up at Emily's work, waiting for her after hours, and leaving her messages expressing his undying love. Emily, feeling increasingly unsafe, decided to confront him one last time, hoping to make him understand the gravity of his actions. They met at a secluded park, away from prying eyes. Emily reiterated that their arrangement was over and that his behavior was unacceptable. She pleaded with him to let go and move on. Sam, unable to accept her rejection, grew desperate. He accused her of leading him on and playing with his emotions. Emily, maintaining her composure, insisted that they part ways and return to their respective marriages. Unbeknownst to them, Rachel had followed Sam to the park. She watched from a distance, her heart pounding as she saw the confrontation unfold. She could see the anguish on Sam's face and the determination on Emily's. Rachel knew that this confrontation was inevitable, but she also feared what might happen next. As the argument escalated, Sam's desperation turned to anger. Emily's refusal to entertain his fantasies felt like a personal betrayal. He lashed out verbally, calling her names and accusing her of ruining his life. Emily, holding back tears, stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Rachel, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to intervene before things got out of hand. She stepped out of her hiding place and approached the two, her voice shaking as she called out to Sam. The sight of Rachel seemed to snap Sam out of his rage, and he turned to her, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Emily, taking advantage of the distraction, walked away, determined to put as much distance between herself and Sam as possible. Rachel, now alone with her husband, tried to calm him down. She reassured him that they would find a way to move past this, but inside, she knew that their lives had been irreversibly changed. The affair had reached its breaking point, and Emily's decision to end the arrangement had set off a chain of events that could not be undone. As the dust settled, the true extent of Sam's obsession and the depths of Rachel's complicity would soon come to light, leading to a tragic and violent conclusion. The confrontation at the park had left Sam in a state of turmoil. Emily's firm rejection and Rachel's unexpected appearance had shaken him to his core. He returned home that night, his mind a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and despair. Rachel, sensing the storm brewing within him, tried to soothe his troubled thoughts, but Sam remained inconsolable. Over the next few days, Sam's behavior became increasingly erratic. He vacillated between bouts of intense anger and deep despondency. He stopped going to work, spending his days obsessing over Emily's rejection and the perceived injustices he had suffered. Rachel, unable to reach him, felt her own frustration and fear growing. She knew something had to give, but she wasn't prepared for the drastic turn of events that would soon unfold. Emily, on the other hand, was determined to move forward. She avoided all contact with Sam, focusing on her work and her relationship with Paul. She hadn't told her husband the full extent of Sam's obsession, fearing his reaction and the potential fallout. She hoped that by cutting ties, Sam would eventually come to terms with the end of their arrangement and leave her alone. One evening, Emily returned home from work to find Sam waiting for her outside her house. Her heart sank at the sight of him, and she steeled herself for another confrontation. She approached him cautiously, her voice steady but firm, as she told him to leave. Sam, his eyes wild with desperation, begged her for one last chance to explain himself. Emily, sensing the futility of the conversation, tried to walk past him, but Sam grabbed her arm. His grip was tight and painful, and Emily could see the madness in his eyes. She struggled to break free, her voice rising as she demanded he let go. The noise attracted the attention of a neighbor, who stepped outside to see what was happening. Seeing the neighbor, Sam released Emily and fled. Emily, shaken and frightened, thanked the neighbor and hurried inside. She called Rachel, hoping to find some way to resolve the situation without involving the police. Rachel, hearing the fear in Emily's voice, agreed to meet with her the next day to discuss how to handle Sam's increasingly unstable behavior. The next day, Rachel met Emily at a local cafe. Emily, looking exhausted and tense, explained the encounter with Sam and her growing fear for her safety. Rachel listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. She promised Emily that she would talk to Sam and make him understand that their relationship was over. After the meeting, Rachel returned home to find Sam in a state of agitation. She confronted him about the incident with Emily, her voice a mix of anger and concern. Sam, feeling cornered, lashed out at her, accusing her of taking Emily's side and betraying him. The argument escalated, and Rachel, fearing for her own safety, retreated to their bedroom. That night, Sam's thoughts turned darker. He couldn't accept that Emily had rejected him and that his own wife was against him. In his twisted mind, he believed that the only way to resolve the situation was to eliminate the source of his pain. He decided that if he couldn't have Emily, no one could. On a cold, clear night, Sam made his way to the Carter's house. He knew Paul was out of town, leaving Emily alone. He broke in through a side window and made his way to the bedroom where Emily lay sleeping. The sight of her, peaceful and unaware, fueled his rage and desperation. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached her, his mind filled with a chaotic mix of love and hatred. Emily awoke to the sight of Sam standing over her, the knife gleaming in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Sam covered her mouth, his grip strong and unyielding. In a fit of rage, he plunged the knife into her chest, silencing her cries as Emily's life slipped away. Sam stood over her, his mind a haze of conflicting emotions. In the aftermath of the murder, Sam fled the scene, his hands stained with Emily's blood. He returned home, where Rachel found him trembling and incoherent. She realized immediately what he had done, and in a moment of twisted loyalty, she decided to help him cover up the crime. The life they had built, the secrets they had kept, were all at stake. Rachel knew that if they were to survive, they needed to act quickly and decisively. Driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation, she quickly took control of the situation. She led Sam to the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and wash off the blood. Her mind raced with the urgency of their predicament. She knew they had to act fast to cover up the crime and protect their secret life. As Sam stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet, Rachel gathered his clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. She scrubbed the floor where he had walked, making sure to eliminate any trace of blood. Once Sam was cleaned up, she sat him down and forced him to recount every detail of what had happened. Despite his emotional state, Sam managed to provide a coherent account, his voice shaking with the weight of his actions. Rachel devised a plan. They needed to create an alibi and dispose of any evidence linking them to the crime. She called a trusted friend, claiming that Sam had been with her all evening, ensuring their alibi was backed up. Then, she drove to a secluded area outside of town, where she burned Sam's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, praying that the fire would consume any remaining evidence. The police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, including the Fosters. Rachel's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Sam, although visibly distressed, managed to avoid raising suspicion. The investigation seemed to stall with no concrete leads pointing to the Fosters. Despite their initial success in evading the authorities, the psychological toll of the murder weighed heavily on both Sam and Rachel. Sam became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. He withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Rachel, while outwardly composed, felt the strain of their secret pressing down on her. She became hypervigilant, scrutinizing every interaction and behavior for signs of suspicion from those around them. The weeks following Emily's murder were a blur of tension and deception for the Fosters. Rachel took on the role of the stabilizer, managing Sam's paranoia while ensuring their public facade remained intact. She monitored the news for any updates on the investigation, relieved that the police seemed to have no solid leads. However, Rachel knew that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to create a narrative that would divert attention away from Sam. She suggested to Sam that he should appear more distraught over Emily's death to align with the community's grief and to throw off any suspicion at social gatherings and community meetings. Sam played the part of the grieving friend. He spoke of Emily with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes often welling up with tears. Paul, devastated and desperate for answers, seemed to appreciate Sam's empathy, never suspecting his friend's involvement in his wife's death. Sam's mental state deteriorated further, his guilt manifesting in nightmares and hallucinations. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace in alcohol but finding only temporary escape. Rachel, fearing he might confess in a drunken stupor, kept a close eye on him, often staying up late to ensure he didn't leave the house. One evening, as Sam sat slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down. He confessed to Rachel that he couldn't live with the guilt any longer and that he needed to come clean. Rachel panicked and tried to calm him down. To help maintain their composure, Rachel suggested they take a short trip out of town. They traveled to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the change of scenery would help Sam regain some semblance of peace. The isolation provided a temporary respite, allowing them to plan their next steps without the constant pressure of the investigation looming over them. During their time at the cabin, Rachel reinforced the importance of their secrecy. She coached Sam on how to handle police questioning and public interaction, drilling him until he could respond without hesitation. Rachel's determination to protect their lifestyle and avoid imprisonment fueled her relentless drive to keep their story straight. Upon returning to Pine Hill, the Fosters resumed their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. Sam, though still haunted by his actions, managed to present a more stable front. Rachel continued to manage their interactions with the community, ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, the cracks in their facade were beginning to show. Friends and neighbors noticed Sam's increased drinking and erratic behavior, and whispers of his possible involvement in Emily's death began to circulate. Rachel, ever vigilant, worked to quash the rumors, but she knew their time was running out. As the police investigation continued, new evidence came to light, pointing towards inconsistencies in Sam's alibi. The Fosters' carefully constructed world was on the brink of collapse, and the truth was closer to being revealed than ever before. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Fosters separately, noting any discrepancies in their stories. Rachel's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Sam's emotional state seemed consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Mitchell's instincts told her there was more to the story. As the weeks passed, new evidence emerged. Forensic analysis of Emily's phone records revealed a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Sam, indicating his obsession with her. Mitchell brought Sam in for further questioning, pressing him on the inconsistencies in his alibi and the nature of his relationship with Emily. Sam, struggling to maintain his composure, stuck to the story Rachel had coached him on, but his nervousness and evasive answers only heightened the detective's suspicions. The turning point came when a neighbor came forward with crucial information. They had seen Sam's car parked near the Carter's house on the night of the murder and remembered the strange behavior he had exhibited. This testimony, combined with the forensic evidence and Sam's erratic behavior, was enough for the police to obtain a search warrant for the Fosters' home. During the search, the police found remnants of the burned clothing and traces of blood that had seeped into the floorboards, despite Rachel's thorough cleaning. This damning evidence, coupled with the witness testimony and phone records, painted a clear picture of Sam's guilt. The net was closing in on the Fosters, and Rachel realized that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. She knew that their only chance of escaping a lengthy prison sentence was to come up with a new plan, one that would shift the blame away from them and onto someone else. As the police closed in, Rachel and Sam faced the harsh reality of their situation. The lies and deceit that had once protected them were now threatening to unravel completely, and the truth was about to be revealed in a way they could never have anticipated. As the evidence against Sam mounted, Detective Mitchell prepared to make her move. She brought Sam in for another round of questioning, this time with a different approach. She laid out all the evidence they had gathered, the phone records, the witness testimonies, and the forensic findings. Sam, cornered and overwhelmed, began to crack under the pressure. Mitchell pressed harder, suggesting that if Sam came clean, he might receive a more lenient sentence. Sam, unable to handle the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, finally broke down. He confessed to killing Emily, describing his obsession, the confrontation, and the moment he lost control. However, in his confession, Sam also implicated Rachel, revealing her role in covering up the crime. He described how she had helped him clean up, dispose of evidence, and craft an alibi. Mitchell, sensing the opportunity to get the full story, had Rachel brought in for questioning as well. Confronted with Sam's confession, Rachel initially denied any involvement, but as Mitchell detailed the evidence in Sam's account, Rachel realized there was no way out. Her carefully constructed lies had finally unraveled. She admitted to helping Sam, explaining that she had done it out of a misguided sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything they had built. The trial of Sam and Rachel Foster captivated Pine Hill and the surrounding region. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, eager to see the conclusion of the tragic tale. Sam was charged with first-degree murder, and Rachel was charged with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice. Both pled guilty to their respective charges. Sam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rachel, despite her role in the cover-up, received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with the investigation and her previously clean record. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. Paul Carter, left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, found some solace in the justice served but continued to mourn the loss of his beloved wife. If this story shocked you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Unfolded Enigmas.